Welcome to this rapid revision exam skills session looking at the Edexcel Paper 2 World Depth Study. Question 2. Write a narrative account, 8 marks. These questions can be a little bit notorious. Although they can be reasonably easily mastered, historically students have often done badly on this. There are some simple mistakes that you can make, and hopefully this video will help you avoid those pitfalls. I'll be focusing on a topic from the American West, 1835 to 1895, which is what my students are learning. However, the tips in this and the mark schemes that we'll look at will actually be useful for any topic that is part of this exam. Let's have a look at what Paper 2 actually involves. Let's get a bit of background about the Pearson Edexcel Paper 2. Traditionally, this is split in two. One is a British depth study, and the other is a European or wider world depth study. The topic that I teach is Anglo-Saxon and Norman England circa 1060 to circa 1087 and the American West 1830 to 1895 for the wider world depth study. In the past, these two have been provided with as separate booklets answered within the same exam. For the year 2022 only though, these exams have been split into two separate shorter exams, so just be mindful of that. Traditionally though, the total time for both papers is 1 hour and 45 minutes. You can half that in 2022, as they will be sat separately. Now let's have a look at the question. With any exam question, it is crucial to really understand what the question is asking you and look for the instructions in them. Writing a narrative account could just be telling a story, but there are several key words in here that we need to take notice of if we're going to get really good marks. Let's have a look at the first part of the question. Write a narrative account analysing. Okay, so a narrative account is like telling a story. It should be in chronological order. It should result in an outcome. It should have an early event, maybe an event in the middle, and something that happens towards the end. But the other key word here is analysing. You've got to analyse this. You've got to explain how one event leads to another and what the importance is. The next part is we're looking at the key events of the Mormon migration. That's important too. We're not looking at the settlement of the Mormons in the Great Salt Lake. That would come later. We're looking at the migration, the movement of the people. And that's highlighted even further by this last bit. We are restricted to studying and discussing the events that happened between 1846 and 1847. Be extremely careful adding any events that come from out of this. It might add a bit of context to what you're writing about, but the chances are you won't get any credit for it unless you're very skillful with how you use it. But like many of the questions in the Edexcel exam board, you are going to get some stimulus points to help you, and it's a good idea to use these. You may use the following in your answer. You don't have to, but again, at least you know that these are going to be relevant, so if you know about them, you might as well. Attitudes towards the Mormons and the Great Salt Lake. But remember, you must also use information of your own. If you don't, then your mark will be limited, as we will see. So for this question, you'll need to explain the story of how something happened. In chronological order, explaining how one event leads to or causes another, resulting in an outcome. The first part of the mark scheme looks like this. Your target is an analytical narrative, which means the analysis of causation, consequence and change. In other words, what causes things to happen, what happens as a result, and what changes. That's known as Assessment Objective 2 or AO2. Knowledge and understanding of features and characteristics, in other words, Assessment Objective 1, is also assessed. And look, you get 4 marks for each. So there should be a roughly equal weighting between the examples and your own knowledge, and also how you explain them and how you link them together. You should aim to spend about 12 minutes on this question. In a moment, we'll have a look at the rest of the mark scheme. So what is the examiner looking for? There's a lot of jargon here, and I've left out level 1 because we really ought to be aiming a little bit higher than this. So I'm going to highlight some of the key differences to you so you can see what you should be doing to differentiate between a decent answer and a really good one. Firstly, in level 3, it says some organisation of material into a sequence of events leading to an outcome. So that might mean that there are bits which are a little bit disorganised, but you should still have a chronological sequence of events that has a basic flow to it, a start, a middle and an end. That's what's meant by an outcome, what happens at the end. Compare that to level 3. It organises the material into a clear sequence of events, so there isn't any muddling up here or getting anything at all unclear. Again, it's still leading to an outcome though. What about next? Well, in level 3, it says that there is some analysis of the linkage between them. So even in level 3, you should be explaining how one event leads to another. And if you're not going to get up to level 2. I think I said level 3 just now, apologise. Level 2, you still need to have some analysis even in level 2. However, to get level 3 at the top, you must analyse the linkage between them in a coherent and logically structured way. In this respect, it really means chronological order, so from earliest events to latest events, explaining how the early events result in the later events and how things develop along the way. Remember, the assessment objective is all about causation, why things happen, consequence, what happens as a result, and change, how does it actually alter. Notice in level 2 it says some passages of the narrative may lack coherence. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's completely out of chronological order, it just might mean that some of your relationships and links that you're trying to make are not especially clear. When it comes to the knowledge, you'll be showing some knowledge and understanding of the events for level 2, but for level 3 you'll be showing good knowledge and understanding of the events. Let's get to an example question and an example answer. As you'll be used to by now, there's plenty of space on the pages to write out your paragraphs. Let's have a look at my first section. I often advise my pupils to use a technique like this, making a point, giving an example, explaining it, and then making a link either back to the question, or in this case, using linking phrases showing how one event leads to another. These can also be handy for showing the chronological nature of the events. So let's get going. Firstly, the Mormons decided to move away from Nauvoo and Illinois because they were suffering from persecution, so already referring to attitudes towards the Mormons. They decided to travel to the Salt Lake Valley, as they felt that nobody would want to follow them to live in such an inhospitable environment. This would be a dangerous journey, so in April 1846, Brigham Young led an advance party of about 150 people from Omaha north of the Oregon Trail to avoid conflict with other settlers. This was successful, as it allowed them to prepare a clear route for the more vulnerable migrants, including prepared river crossings and planting food that could be harvested by the main Mormon party. Okay, so I've begun my story and telling them how they are planning and preparing for the migration. So I get some AO1 and AO2 marks for the first part there. I get some AO1 marks for my supporting detail. I also get some AO2 marks for the fact that I'm explaining how one thing is leading to another. So, for example, they are anticipating the danger of the journey, preparing in advance, and avoiding conflict with other settlers. That's again referring to the attitudes towards the Mormons. And then again some AO1 and AO2 in that last bit there, where it shows that the plan is to bring the vulnerable migrants along next, once the heavy lifting, if you like, has been done planning the journey. So I've begun to tell my story, but I've not finished yet. I've got the start, I now need to get the rest. So let's have a look at this next section. Point, example, explain, and again, check out those linking phrases. Consequently, okay, so it means as a result, the Mormons were prepared to move their main migrant party in a relatively safe fashion compared to less well-prepared groups like the Donner Party. In August 1847, the main party of Mormons travelled along the newly established Mormon Trail. Brigham Young's careful preparation had enabled the safe migration, which led to thousands of other Mormons being able to travel to Salt Lake Valley along the Mormon Trail in well-organised wagon trains. As a result, the Mormons under Brigham Young were able to establish a new Mormon settlement at the Great Salt Lake. Importantly here, I have actually been referring to other bits of my knowledge, and quite a lot of it. So I'm not going to be restricted to only looking at the attitudes of Mormons and the Great Salt Lake, which would limit my mark. I can get access to those top marks because I am including my own knowledge as well. So the first section shows elements of both AO1 and AO2, backed up by a bit of extra AO1 knowledge. And then the last section also has some AO1 and AO2. Check out where those linking phrases are, things like consequently, which led to, and as a result. It shows that I really understand not only the order in which things happened, but how one thing is leading to another. The only problem I've got now is, although I've come to a sort of outcome, I've not really nailed down all of the analysis here. So let's add some extra with a short conclusion. The most important event of the migration was Brigham Young's decision to send an advance party to prepare the route for the migrants. This allowed the mixed group of migrants to safely travel on what might otherwise have been a dangerous route. This shows that Brigham Young's leadership was crucial for the success of the migration. As a result, the Mormons could start a new life at the Great Salt Lake. And there is my real outcome here. I'm not going further than 1847 and looking at how they made the settlement into a thriving establishment, but I am looking at what the outcome is and analysing the importance of Brigham Young within that narrative. And that's going to hit both AO1 and AO2, as we will see here. And so hopefully, with an answer like that, I'll get full marks. But what if I hadn't done quite so well? Following this, Brigham Young organised the new settlers based on skills and need. This allowed other settlements to grow up providing minerals, timber and other things to help the settlement thrive. This meant Salt Lake City was able to thrive under the strong leadership of Brigham Young. Well, all of that is accurate, so would I get any marks? The answer is no. That's not relevant to the Mormon migration, and it's not necessarily relevant to the years 1846 to 47. And that's the importance of reading the question. Even though all of this knowledge shows that you've got a pretty decent understanding of the topic, it doesn't show that you've got a command of reading and understanding what the question is asking of you. And unfortunately, you wouldn't get any marks for that. Here are some other American West narrative accounts that you could try. I've included some stimulus points as well, but your approach should be more or less the same. Write a narrative account analysing the ways in which US government treatment of the Plains Indians developed between 1830 and 1851. Your stimulus points are the Indian Removal Act of 1830 and the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851. Okay, that's a pretty stinking question, that one there, but I've included it because it is so important to know some of the, dare I say, more boring developments early on, where it's just about the different laws that are introduced. I've got a separate rapid revision video on this very topic if you're interested. 2. Write a narrative account analysing the development of migration after the discovery of gold in California between 1848 and 1860, the gold rush and Chinese migrants. Write a narrative account analysing the ways in which the cattle industry developed between 1867 and 1887. Personally, I think it's reasonably unusual that they would give you this wide a date range, but it could happen with something like the cattle industry. Stimulus points are Joseph McCoy and the winter of 1886 to 87. Lastly, write a narrative account analysing the ways in which the Plains Indians' lifestyle was destroyed between 1872 and 1887. Stimulus points being the Buffalo and the Dawes Act of 1887. Again, remember the stimulus points are there to help you. You don't have to use them to get full marks, but it's probably a good idea to because you know at least they'll be relevant. If you're one of my students, well, we're studying the American West, so you should probably stop things here. But if you're not, then you might want to consider one of some of these others if you're doing a different topic. If you're studying Spain and the New World, try this one. Write a narrative account analysing the key events of 1519 to 21 that led to the Aztec surrender. Your stimulus points are Cortez's expedition in 1519 and the capture of Tenochtitlan in 1521. I'll be honest, I've got no idea if I've pronounced that correctly. This isn't one of the topics I teach. If you're looking at British America, write a narrative account analysing the ways in which piracy was suppressed in American waters in the years 1717 to 1720. George I's proclamation in 1717 is your first stimulus point, and the second is Governor Spotswood. And if you're studying superpower relations, write a narrative account analysing the key events of the Berlin Crisis 1948 to 1949. Stalin's fears and the airlift are your relevant stimulus points. I don't teach that one, but I reckon I could answer it. Some final points then. 8-mark narrative account questions can be a challenge, but they're easy enough to master with a bit of practice. You will need specific knowledge and to be careful to keep your examples within the stated date range. You will need to explain how events are linked. This involves explaining how one event causes or leads to another. You will need to write a chronologically organised answer, in time order from earliest to latest. Start with an early event and finish with the outcome. A short conclusion can often add that extra layer of analysis that you might otherwise be lacking, considering the more important events and overall themes. That's the end of this rapid revision exam skills lesson, so I hope it's been useful to you. If it has, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you need further tips on some of these more tricky questions, you could always pop a question down in the comments below, and if I can help, I will do so. If you're studying for an exam soon, the very best of luck.